we have invited our vendors to come and speak to you. We've also set up on the Zoom events page, if you click on the tab sponsors, you can find out more about the sponsors. You can actually communicate with them. They've put some materials, but I'm going to introduce Andrea Simmons. She's the Director of Outreach and Partnerships for Learning Bird. Learning Bird is an organization that supports First Nation schools and communities in integrating language, culture, history, and teachings into their classroom materials. And with that, I will pass it on to Andrea.
Thank you, Mana. I appreciate that. I'm just going to pop this into slideshow. Wonderful. Thank you all for joining this morning early as we get started in the conference. Just wanted to take a second to introduce myself and to let you know where I'm joining from. So my name is Andrea Simmons. I'm a settler of French, English, and Irish descent, and I'm joining today from the traditional and present day territory of the Kangadesa people. And I work with Learning Bird, as Mana mentioned. So she covered very briefly who we are and what we do. I'm going to get a little more detail about that and talk about some of the projects that we do. When I looked at the attendee list, there were a lot of familiar names. So some of you have already worked with us or have already chatted with us about different projects. But for those who were new to, I just want to give a bit of an overview to see if we might be of assistance in some capacity moving forward. So Learning Bird is an organization that partners with First Nations schools and communities to create digital resources. And we talk about digital resources, that could be a variety of different things. Mostly we do a lot of video-based resources, audio-based materials, those types of things. We also offer support for curriculum and course development. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in our overview here. What makes us unique is the mix of people that are part of our team. So we certainly understand the need for that strong pedagogy piece, and we bring in educators with a specialization in First Nations education and experience teaching in Indigenous communities. And then we partner that with filmmakers and media specialists who really are experts at creating engaging digital content. So we kind of bring both pieces of the puzzle together. And we've had the privilege over the last 6 years to work with 55 different schools across 52 communities and 7 provinces. So yeah, as I mentioned, many of our partners are joining the session over the next couple of days. So I'm sure that we'll have the opportunity to connect with different folks. So in terms of what we offer as different services, this is kind of an overall mix of what we deliver. For any nation partner that we work with or school that we work with, this mix is different, honestly. We do projects based on need, based on timeline, based on budget, and we develop something custom that fits the needs of each of the partners that we work with. So what we can do in terms of the larger mix of products and services is we can create language and culture resources. We do this in partnership, so we do not have the language speakers. We rely on our partners for that knowledge, and what we do is help frame that knowledge and deliver it in a way that can be used in a classroom setting, in a language culture class, or in community language learning. So we help film videos, collect audio, do full production, script writing, those types of services, and help bring that vision to life that you have to create materials. We can create language books, animated videos, flashcards, those types of things. We also do curriculum and course development. So if there's any work that you need in terms of creating custom language and culture for K-12, for community learning, we can do the requirements gathering with you, framework, month plans, curriculum writing, packaging of those documents and support materials, as well as supporting teachers on the implementation of those materials. So we do a lot of work on educator training, workshops, coaching. We have a full set of professional development workshops that we offer, both in person and virtual. And we also offer some student workshops as well on digital storytelling, audio video skills, to just help get youth involved with elders and community members to gather materials and to learn directly from those recordings. We do digital conversion as well with audio, video, print conversion, sort of repackaging and rethinking some of the historical materials you might have and bringing them into the classroom context and the language learning capacity. So these are all different types of services. Because these can come together in so many different ways, I just wanted to highlight 4 different projects that we've done to kind of show you that mix and how that ties together into a project. So one of the projects that we did was, for example, a K-12 language and culture curriculum in collaboration with the Cree Nation in Alberta. The nation had some initial curriculum documents that they wanted to modernize and build upon. So we collaborated with them to help on that project. And in doing so, we are also building out resources to support each outcome in that curriculum. So that's one type of project. Another project that we had done with a nation partner was looking at developing a series of multi-level language videos. This was under a language grant. So over the course of 3 years, we created 120 different videos together, vocabulary, interviews, more simple conversation. Some of these were direct interviews, some of them were animated or illustrated styling. So these are the variety of different types of materials. We've also worked in the adult education resource space to create resources to support adult learners in doing high school recovery courses. So we've done that type of work. Also digital conversion, so working with nations to take historical audio cassettes with elder interviews and clips and all different teachings, and to bring those into modern video resources. That's kind of just a flavor of some of the work that we've done. In terms of professional development, I know many nations host education conferences. So our team does also do workshops if that's something you have an interest in. So looking at workshops for teachers around different topics, we can also create custom workshops if that's something you had a specific topic in mind, and our team has the expertise to support that. So those workshops can be either in person or virtual, depending on needs. We do as well some student workshops, as I mentioned, around digital storytelling. These are usually, multiple day, half-day workshops where we would work with students to bring in technology equipment and to do some of that storytelling work. And we always want to support educators as well. So we offer a variety of free resources on our website and our blog. So we have regular posts that talk about different topics that may be introduced in the classroom setting. And we also have a number of different free resources that Learning Bird has produced, or we've highlighted partner resources or resources from organizations that do just a great job in supporting teachers. So we kind of bring this all together on our blog for educators. So that's all at learningbird.com. And we also offer a series of free webinars. We're going to be restarting our webinar series here in about a month or so. So we offer those as well for educators. That's a little bit of an overview of what we do. I'm happy to take questions. I know we're just a couple of minutes before the top of the hour, but if anyone has anything that they would like to ask, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, well, thank you, Andrea. If you do think of questions later, you can always try and send a direct chat to Andrea. Oh, Ursula, I see Ursula, you have a question?
Yes, good morning. I'm from Oneida in southwestern Ontario. I want to go for the invite for this. I just wanted to know from Andrea, how does one start? How do I get? Can we join your services? And is there a cost?
Yeah, we'd be happy to chat with you. We price out things depending on scope and what we would be doing together. We can also work with nations as well in terms of putting together grant applications to help frame out a project under a grant, if that's something that is of interest. So we can chat a little bit more. I'd encourage you to reach out to myself or Meryl Cost and Greg Manias are both on here as well from Learning Bird. So if you wanted to reach out to any of us by direct message or pop onto our website, and my email address is andrea@learningbird.com. We'd love to hear from you. We can chat about how we could support you.
Okay, now.
Wonderful,
Okay.
thanks.
Well, thank you, Ursula, for that question. Any other questions? again, if you do have questions and you want to speak to Andrea, go to the sponsor page. You'll see not only Andrea's profile, but also that of her colleagues. There's also ways to get in touch with Andrea, and we encourage you. And again, we want to thank our vendors. It helps us put on this event. So, miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Simon,
Okay.
back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Menno and Andrea. Thank you very much. This is Andrea's second year with us, and your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you. So welcome to the second First Nations Education Administrators Association National Gathering. We held a virtual one last year. We're virtual this year. Next year, we're looking at a in-person in Winnipeg. So my name is Simon Brascoupé, and I'm your virtual MC. It's my honor to introduce Gedan Degelo. And Mike, I'm going to keep working at this to get it perfect. But Mike has asked us to use his true name, his traditional name, Mike Mitchell. He'll open the gathering in a good way with a Thanksgiving address. As many of you know, he's a respected First Nations leader here in Canada. He's done work nationally and internationally. He was born in Akwesasne and raised in a traditional family. And he has had the benefit of a strong cultural and spiritual upbringing. And what I love about Mike is practicing his traditional teachings, diplomatic skills, and solving today's challenges for Indigenous people at the local, regional, national, and international level. And so I'll just turn it over to Mike for the opening.
Yeah, well, Simon, I want to try to explain in English first what one person who would be chosen to do the opening. It's called The Words That Come Before All Else. And a person that is selected speaks for everyone. And he usually starts from the ground we call Mother Earth. And everything that comes from her is what keeps us strong. So we give thanks to Mother Earth, and then to the waters, to the land, to the medicines, the tree life, the bird life, animal life, the four winds. You have the grandmother moon, elder brother sun, the stars, and beyond. And the speaker will take great care to mention each one of these as a thanksgiving to all of creation, and picking apart item by item. And when he finished, and then he says, this is what brings our minds as one. And we give tribute for everything that gives us life. We honor the Creator for everything that has been provided to us. And we also honor his messengers, the spirit guardians, who watch over individually, families, communities. And when we ask in a good way for their guidance when in times of difficulty. All these things our ancestors has passed on to us. And when nations met, they made sure that they have a speaker, an elder who is going to take away all the distractions and put all their minds in unison, concentrate on what has brought them together for a meeting. And today it is my job to make you aware of the importance of what we'll be discussing. First, we're going to honor and thank the Creator for the life that we have and for what has been given to us to share. We also acknowledge the speaking, because this will be said in our my language first. And then I guess I did the reverse. I explained in English first. And I'll give you sort of like the executive version in my language, because I think a lot better when I can think in my own language and express in words in my own language. And part of the reason that we're all here is that we don't ever want to lose our language. We want to respect our culture. We want to respect our languages, ceremonies, teachings. There's something that we can pass on. And however time is spent, because it's something you can't write into a classroom, but we can share the importance of what it means to be Oklahoma. And those teachings, for us as Oklahoma in Akwesasne, we have certain ceremonies throughout the year. It's all marked from midwinter, and then from the time in the spring, maple syrup in the spring, strawberry planting in the fall, harvest, and it just goes on until the cycle is complete. It is a time when our people get together to honor the Creator, to honor our people, our elders. It is a time for our children to receive their names. And sacred songs are sung, social songs are sung as an expression of joy for living a good life and to honor the land, the water, the air. And so today, those thoughts are expressed in our Thanksgiving. And I'll say so in my own language, make it as short so we can continue on with all the things, important things that we want to discuss today. Nega din higa wanage no when he said tigaragatska. Ne di do yaranta be di chin horado di chin sta. Jum jade. Ne agu badai what's come hage not the guada that sta. To no jum jade e kanegaro e no nige on quats or odi. Dano ni order do what's cactus. You be roto. Dano negayo e dona down hake. Dano do what's cactus the audio jit hoguma honor jiki adano rota. Say this is thing what's still. Chirigari wish you connected that you on jade. Ni oni ne da di wela se ci se to bon and I was it just at the negara. You know I will have what you got for hake you want jade. Nega di oni digging the gara or scan each and I don't quite your t-shirt. A sotane kan wa de aguswate. Dano ne oni ne che do achia ne no do swate moni serate. Ona e just na kwa son oni do atska so sotane kan wa. Agwega di do ro. Di chino agwega skani guna dunya. Ne si ga ja agwega na do di daki na ya skana agwa hakchum jate. Ona de chi do one holadu ge oni ne so wa de e ji ru wa da. Desaguri honyane nechi sotobon na yama skan aga hakchi do na when I there's a way to get never gonna don't go ne what's gonna so no one is a agu get skan aga kunio she now did it down in on and they got the new one now actually we're going to with so much in a guy ne scotcha and what's gonna we have been given teachings by our ancestors. And at a time when only our Indigenous people lived on Turtle Island, these teachings, sacred teachings, were given to us by our ancestors, teachings from our creation, from our Creator, to have respect for the land, to have respect for all of creation, the animal, the bird life, and everything that gives us life, from the land to the water, tree life, bird life. And as we finish, we turn around skyward and thank the Creator for this day that we have been given to walk the land again. We thank the Creator for the health of our individual selves, peace of mind, for our children, our young people, our elders, our families, our communities, and our nations. All these good minds we put towards ourselves for the meeting that we're going to have today. with these good thoughts, we're able to express ourselves in a good way. And so those are the words that will open your meeting today. I give all my best thoughts to all of you this morning. I'm speaking to you from the Akwesasne and Mohawk territory, and we share our First Nation teachings with one another. We're going to be talking about the importance of education, ideas, and it's one of sharing, whether it be our teachings of our traditional kind, whether it's teachings of modern kind. We need all of that to succeed, to be successful, and to have that peace of mind that we're talking about, making our children strong and healthy. And so with those words, I turn it back to our chairman, Simon.
Yawagoa. They don't get de golo. Thank you for the opening. Turn it over to Dr. Paulette Tremblay. She's the president and CEO of First Nations Education Administrators Association for some opening remarks. Paulette.
Goa, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge and give thanks for being, I'm in the Ottawa area on the West End, and it is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquins, but it is also the traditional territory of the Mohawks and Haudenosaunee. So I just want to acknowledge that, and I'd like to say Nyawagoa to Mike Mitchell. He has been such a wonder of support to us and the work that we're doing. And we rely on his good judgment and his traditional knowledge and understanding of our languages. So I hold him up very high. And so the words were beautiful. The language resonated in my soul. So I'll go for that, Mike. And I also like to give thanks to our speaker from the morning. And I think that Andrea Simmons provided some valuable information to share. And that's what this is about, sharing information, giving you a national platform to share information. And so today I have a presentation. I'd like to put it on the screen so that we can just walk through it. There are words about who we are, and I'm going to try to see if I can share the screen so I can move the slides. So let me find those dots. Okay, I'm not finding this. So maybe Menno, you can just do it for me.
Okay.
It's just easier. I'll just say next. Okay, it's just easier. I don't want to. Okay, so today we're going to talk. This whole national gathering is about Indigenous languages. And it's about the traditions of interconnectedness and First Nations control of First Nations education. I know all of the education administrators, and there are more than 640 communities, so that's how many there are. They are diverse, they are inclusive, and this is our way. And so I want to say that we're going to be talking about that, and I'm delighted to do so because I think we've made huge progress in moving forward. Next. And so the what we're going to I have topics, 4 topics today. We're going to, well, really 5. I'm going to introduce who we are as First Nations Education Administrators Association. I'll just say FNEAA because it's easier. Then we're going to talk about languages, First Nations languages. We're going to talk about traditions of interconnectedness. We're going to talk about First Nations control of First Nations education. And the last topic is about moving forward. And so next. So the FNEAA, our vision, mission, and values will tell you so much about us. We balance the interconnectedness in education, which is rooted in First Nations languages, cultures, traditions, self-determination under a First Nations control of First Nations education. We're totally ecstatic about this vision because we can see that it's about our traditional ways, ceremonies. That's our mandate. So that's what we work at and what we do. And I know that our office at FNEAA, it's in Akwesasne, in the Pine Tree Mall. And we work hard at learning how to be traditional. And so we'll talk about that when we talk about interconnectedness and First Nations control of First Nations education. Our mission is we're a gathering place for First Nations education administrators to share information, collect and share ideas, enhance capacity in education certification, professional development, partnership, systems development, and services, mentoring, and conferences. That are our goals, our focus. Our values are unique because it's committed to values associated in the teaching of our members' nations. So we, rather than espousing specific values, we say every one of the nations, and there are over 640, will have their own, and we honor that and hold that up. And that is our way. We go to community, and community, we're a bottom-up organization. Next. The strategic plan, we've just created a new one that was approved September 20, 2023 to 2028, where we do certification, goal 1, professional development. We work on partnerships, we work on education systems development and services, and we work on mentoring, and we have an annual conference where we provide a national gathering to network and share our ideas, our gifts, so that others can learn and become, because we're a professional body who wants to help you become, and focused on self-identity, self-esteem, all of the things that matter in yourself as a Mohawk, for me, as a Mohawk woman. And so we focus on that, we work on that, and we want to help you understand how to do that. Next. Languages is one of the first things. You know, I know Dr. Ron Ignace for many, many years. We began, 2001. He came to Assembly First Nations when I was there heading up the education department, and worked on languages, setting it up, wanting to lobby ministers for money for the languages program that had been rolled out a long time ago. And he is now, I'm happy to say, the commissioner of the Indigenous languages at Canadian Heritage. I think we're in amazing hands with this man who has dedicated his life to politics, to his community, and to making life better, and bringing it to the national level, lobbying and advocating on behalf of First Nations across Canada. In 2017, Dr. Marianne Ignace was asked by the Shuswap Nation Tribal Council to write a book that outlined the shared wisdom of the elders. It was to serve as a tool to gain insights about the values and cultural importance of the connection to the land and oral histories. And Dr. Marianne Ignace is Ron's wife, and he worked collaboratively with her to write the oral narratives and shared memories of the 17 Shwepin communities. Please forgive me if I pronounce things wrong. I'm terribly awful at language, but I'm still doing it, and so I just ask your forgiveness right up front. In this book, I have one here, and in this book, you'll see the picture of it on the screen. There are 14 sections that help us understand relationship with the land, and it's from the Shwepmek people's perspective. about the land and the laws and the relationship they have with that, and telling the story in great detail of how that unfolded. And section 4 is on the Shuswap language. And they give a great historical with lots of detail that it came from the elders and from the people, and all of the materials and documents historically about that. It's really in depth, it's really in detail, but it's a must read. And we're going to provide this book to all our speakers because we feel it's an invaluable tool that shows you how it lights the way, lights the path for what you might want to do in your community. And it all takes time, and it's probably a lifelong journey that you take with your people in your local area. Next, please. We'd also like to say Nyagoa to all First Nations language providers across Canada. We know there are many of you and many organizations, many individuals who have worked on languages, their own languages, their lifetimes. And we want to honor and hold you up and acknowledge the work that you're doing in your communities, in your nations. So Nyagoa. And we want to give a special thanks to Kaylee Jacko Wentana Nora for providing online Mohawk language training to the FNEAA employees. We really are enjoying them. We plan to be in a different place next year, and hopefully when we do our national gathering, we'll be speaking more of our Mohawk language, and we're looking forward to it. So Nyago, everybody. Next.
Okay.
Yes, Simon?
Nothing.
Do you want me to stop?
No, keep going. Sorry.
Okay. I'm just gonna talk about taking control of First Nations education. That's the key to all of this. I know that at pre-contact, hundreds of years ago, First Nations had sovereignty across the country. We had treaties with each other before the settlers arrived, before contact. And then we went through a period of assimilation and colonialism, Indian Act, residential schools, independency. I'm sure most of you know this story. So now what we're all trying to do, because legislation has been passed, and it's now a requirement for the state to give us money to help us become self-governing, self-affirming, with our self-identity and self-esteem, and know who we are and how we're connected to the land and the place. So we're trying to get back to self-governance and First Nations control and implementation. And I think that, as I said, First Nations Education Administrators Association is working in that regard. And we hope that you will contact us and work with us as we move forward with this initiative. Nyagoa.
Nyagoa, Paulette. Sorry for interrupting. You said next, and I thought, oh, that's me. So Nyagoa, I would like to introduce Darren Gugu, who's the FNEAA Chair and Director of Education for Member 2 for over 20 years. He has a strong passion for creation and the implementation of ideas that move Mi'kmaq education forward. Darren, for your welcoming words.
Thank you, Simon. Make sure I'm not on mute. I did that earlier. I want to thank everybody across the country from east to west and north to south for coming and participating in this year's virtual workshops conference. When we started out with the FNEAA not many, but 4 years ago, we did so with a vision of unifying voices in education amongst First Nations educational administrators across this country. And the reason we chose, why we chose to do that was that we recognize that we all work together much more strongly than we work apart. So I want to thank you all for participating in our conference today. And I want you to remember that over this year's theme of this year's conference is First Nations languages. And what we hope over the next 2 days is to gather the energy, the ideas, the innovations that exist across the country, knowing that there are complex questions, and the issue of First Nations language revival is a complex one, and it requires many answers to make a solution set. So each of us will contribute in our own way to this solution set, and the hope is that many years from now, our languages will still be here and still be strong and vibrant in our communities. I want to thank you all for participating. Simon?
Okay, thank you. Miigwech, Darren, Miigwech. So I'd like to introduce Davin Dumas from Manitoba. He's the Director of Language and Culture, the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center. He's going to talk about the role of First Nations education administrators in language and culture. He's from Sandy Bay, Ojibwa First Nation, and he's understanding of the connection to the land is important. And as he says, it continues to grow. He's worked in education for over 20 years, and he's a certified teacher. He's taught various grades and subjects, and he's been the vice principal, a principal, and a director of education. He is an Ojibwa speaker, and he values culture, local history, and family. And he's a husband, a father, and a Mosham, and also a director on our board of directors. So turn it over to Davin Miigwech. Davin.
Miigwech Simon. Anin bonjour kena. Davin Dumas Disnikas. Zongem estadem gen Disnikas mia anisnabe wizun ai minyoan. Kawi kwendong akendonji. Tinim minandam ai tabiawetiman tabiagi donaman ongom. Good morning, everyone. My name is Davin Dumas, as Simon had mentioned, and I'm coming to you from Treaty 1 territory. My First Nation, Sandy Bay Ojibwe First Nation, is a signatory to Treaty 1, and coming to you from Winnipeg. So first, I want to acknowledge the words that were said by Mike Mitchell this morning, Miigwech, for your Thanksgiving this morning, and I'm happy to be here. I've been a part of FNEAA in some shape or form since it started, since it was moved that we needed an organization to support First Nations administrators across Canada from the start. So just going to share my screen. Are we good? Can we see it, Claire?
We're all good.
Okay, thank you. So this morning I've been asked to come and talk about the role of First Nation education administrators in language and culture revitalization. So there's a number of questions that I'm going to be posing to you, more to think about and to consider. You know, I'm going on the assumption that many of you are administrators of some sort, school administrators, directors of education, and so forth. And we need to think about some things when we talk about language and culture revitalization efforts. And what are we doing? So what are we doing as administrators in supporting language and culture revitalization? So just a quick overview of the presentation, do a little bit of an introduction. I'm going to talk about the current state of languages, some of the barriers, have a little bit of a discussion, give you some considerations, and then conclude. So again, I know it's a little bit different when we're not in person, so I had to modify some things within my presentation, but I am going to try and provide some time at the end for any questions or comments that anybody may have. So I know Simon did mention, you know, in the introduction a little bit about myself, but you know, I am first and foremost a father and a husband and a Muslim. Right now we have 13 grandchildren that are very young, and you know, I'm hoping that the work that we do can influence the learning that takes place with them, so that is different from the way we learned, specifically with language and culture. But you know, I spent 8 years as a school administrator and another 6.5 years as an education director on top of the years that I was teaching. And now in my current role as the Director of Languages and Cultures with the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center. Our organization provides second level services to 31 schools and 28 First Nations in Manitoba. So pretty busy. Language and culture is one area. All the subject or discipline areas we provide supports, as well as we have a number of staff who are working on developing resources to support language and culture in Manitoba, as well as we have a publishing department that publishes all our own stuff. So we don't have to go and knock on anybody's door to produce these items. We do it all in-house. So we've been very fortunate with the support of our leadership in our region to be able to have an organization like this that can provide a wealth of resources to our communities. So we talk about the state of languages. You know, I want you to think a little bit about what is the state of language in your First Nation. For those of you that are First Nations and belong to a First Nations community, what is the state of language in your First Nation? Now, I know many times when we talk about the state of language, it's often looked at by the age of speakers within the First Nation. So at what age do language speakers kind of stop or begin, right? Many communities, in some of the work that we've done, we're noticing they only have speakers that are 60 years old and over. Some rare ones have 40 and over, and some super rare ones have under 40. So, you know, I'm fortunate that our First Nation, Sandy Bay, does have a number of speakers that are under 40 years old, even to where we have some children that are still speaking the language. We really notice around 30 and under that a lot of them understand the language, but they don't speak it. You speak to them in the language and they'll respond to you in English. So it's concerning, but it's at the same time. So when you think about it, think about your community. You know, what age do your speakers begin? And some of the information that I'll share right now is may reflect your community. So according to some of the research I did, there's approximately 60 First Nation languages across Canada, or there were. Of these, there are 15 that are extinct. So there's 15 First Nation languages that will not have speakers again. They're extinct. And the complexity of some of those languages, it's not something that can be learned from what was documented on those languages. So it's very concerning that we have already have 15 across Canada that are extinct. And the expectation is that there's only 4 that will be viable into the future, which is Cree, Inuktitut, Ojibwe, and Mohawk. So those are the only 4 that are expected to span past 50 years if we don't do something about it. At the current rate, 50 years, all the other First Nation languages will become extinct. So that's very concerning. So First Nation languages are in danger. The exception is Inuktitut, which 80% of the population still speaks their language. So which was surprising that that stat that I found, that 80% of them still speak their language. So they're very strong in their language in the north. And then, you know, when we look at census reports, now I know some people will argue with me, but they do give a generalization of the decline in language speakers, even though, you know, a lot of our families may not participate in census. But in 1996, the census reported that 29% of Aboriginal people new and Aboriginal language. 5 years after that, it dropped down to 17.2%, which is a 12% drop in 5 years, which is pretty significant. And most recent numbers indicate that only 7% of First Nations in Manitoba identify as fluent speakers in 2021. And I actually just the other day was listening to, he's a Mohawk scholar, professor, Ryan DeCare, and he recently stated that only 2% of First Nations speak their languages across Canada. So that was just the other day he was talking about that. So there is a drastic decline in the number of language speakers across Canada, which is very concerning. And as I mentioned of these numbers, the highest reported First Nation language was Cree, followed by Inuktitut and Ojibwe. So with the most speakers in Canada. So we need to be concerned, especially if your First Nation language does not fall within Cree, Inuktitut, and Ojibwe. The urgency is now, and we really need to think about that as administrators. So another stat from Stat Canada is that the age of First Nation people who reported speaking their First Nation language has risen. So this is an indication that language is decreasingly being passed on to children. So the speakers are getting older and there's no new speakers being taught or emerging. The current status of languages is very concerning. Many languages are under threat of extinction. So they're endangered, if you want to say that. Our languages are in a state of endangerment and are on the verge of extinction. And Dr. Brenna Kirkness, who many of you may know from her work, Dr. Kirkness has done work in education now, I think, for 60 years. So she has been instrumental in a lot of work regarding languages and First Nations education. And in one of her works, she posed a question that should be addressed by everyone whose language is under siege. And that question is, what do you lose when you lose a language? So that's the question she asked. And I share that one because it resonated with me when I started to think about it. So I want you to think about that question for now, and we'll come back to it in a bit. What do you lose when you lose a language? Okay. So barriers. We must recognize that there are barriers that affect the transmission of First Nation language. And I know for many of you, you know these barriers. I share this because we have, or there's a potential that many of our administrators are non-First Nation. I know that, it varies from time to time in our region on the amount of school administrators that are First Nation, that are from the community or from another community. But we increasingly see that there are administrators that are of other races or places. We have seen an uptake in Filipino administrators, administrators from the East, from Newfoundland, Scotia, and so forth. So, they may not be fully aware of the barriers that affect the transmission of First Nation languages. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to, I bring this up as part of the presentation. So one of the barriers, of course, is the intergenerational trauma that has been brought upon by the residential school disruption. I call it the residential school disruption because it disrupted a lot of things from being passed on from generation to generation, creating that intergenerational trauma. And I did not personally attend residential school or day school, but my mother is a residential school survivor, and I am cognizant of the effects that her attending those schools has had on us as children. as their children, and it goes more and beyond language, but it also reflects some of the other traumas that were still displayed and still carried on through each of us that trace back to that disruption. So, it's hard for non-First Nations sometimes to understand the effects, those residual effects of residential schools and intergenerational trauma. So it's important that they understand, that they realize the significance that impact has had. Some of the barriers as well are with government policies, refusing to allow us autonomy over education in what we want to teach our children. For many, many years, part of funding for First Nations education was you have to follow provincial curriculum if you want to be funded for school. And many of those provincial curriculums did not have First Nations content other than the fur trade. We learned about Egypt and England and all these other places, but we never learned about ourselves. So those government policies tying us to non-First Nations processes and learning systems really affected language transmission. Fear. There's that overarching fear of learning languages, of being laughed at for not saying things properly, and just overall fear that that can be linked back to that intergenerational trauma again. Another barrier that has been brought up quite a bit is the lack of resources, or underdeveloped or not developed writing systems, the conflict over dialects, whose dialect is the proper way, the right way, and should we use orthography or syllabics as writing. So writing systems in general, I think, are a barrier as well, as we tend to, when teaching language, trying to focus on what is the right way to write language when we're an oral language, that our language is passed on orally. So that's a barrier. Lack of speakers. I know we have, I know of some communities in our region that are gung-ho to, that are really gung-ho to run immersion programs. We want full language, but they have no speakers. So that's a barrier. That's a big barrier. I know for sure in Manitoba, we have one community that has lost all of its original speakers in its community. So they no longer have anyone that speaks their original dialect of their First Nation language, and now are having to bring in people from other communities to teach language. And I know they've talked about the concern that it's not going to be theirs anymore. They're really concerned with that because it's the ones who understood the language but didn't speak hear the difference. So it's a concern. Lack of support. So there's still that lack of support for languages. I've many times argued for years now that anytime that we come together and talk about what is important for education, language and culture is always at the top, but then gets pushed aside to talk, and we focus on other things. That happened when I was a principal, and we have regional principal meetings. Language and culture priority, but it gets pushed aside. As a director of education, it's a priority. Language and culture is a priority, gets pushed aside. So we have to quit doing that as part of a strategy. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then that there's no use for languages. So we still hear people say there's no use for languages. Why bother? Not going to help. That's a barrier. You could have 100 people that say, you know, we want language, we want our children to learn the language, and you have that one naysayer, and it brings everything down. So that's a barrier. It's amazing how one naysayer can really bring down the tone or the drive of everybody else in a room that is wanting to learn language. So again, that's a barrier. Western systems of education are a barrier. You know, I'm just as guilty as anybody else being trained in Western post-secondary institutions. That curriculum is the be-all, end-all, and that comes first. And that education only happens in that square box called a classroom. So like I said, I'm as guilty as many teachers, and coming out of university, I'm going to teach that curriculum. We're going to shove it down those kids' throat, never mind where they're from or you know, their language or anything. They got to learn English, they got to read, they got to write. Curriculum. So that's a barrier. That's been a barrier for our languages. And then the last one, I heard it called other things, but I call it unexplained language transmission block. So there are barriers that are unexplained that, you know, if you want, could be attributed to the intergenerational trauma from residential schools and so forth, but as to why we don't pass our languages on to our children. I'm guilty of that. Something stopped me and from teaching my children my First Nation language. I understand my mother did not teach me my language because it was, you know, was beaten out of her in residential school to not speak it. So I understand that, but what stopped me, right? My wife and I talk about this, is that unexplained language transmission block. What stopped us? What stopped me? And I've talked to many people about that. They've done the same thing. They haven't passed it on to their children. So it's important that we recognize that and start changing that view, removing that block. There's an elder language teacher in Manitoba who has been recently talking about having a language conference specifically addressing that language block. So I met with her in the spring, and she pitched that idea of wanting support for something like that in addressing that language block. So something that may come, but we'll see. So part of the discussion, and I know we're not in person, so it's a little bit difficult, but I want you to think about some of these questions. I want you to think about it as an education administrator, whether you're a school principal, vice principal, director of education. These are some questions that, you know, I want you to think about when we talk about language and culture. So what is your vision for First Nation language? So if you think right now, if I was to put you on the spot and pick 2 or 3 of you from the Zoom crowd, would you be able to provide a clear vision, your vision for a First Nation language? Okay. Is that something that you have? Is that something that you have as part of your school planning process overall, your education process within the community in which you work? Do you have those in place? Okay. And what do you want to see as a result of your efforts? What is it? What is the end goal? What do you want to see? So the other question is, what type of program are you currently running to preserve or revitalize language in your community or school? Is it a language class once or twice a school cycle? Is it teaching a First Nation language as a subject? Is it a bilingual program? Or is it an immersion program? So what type of program are you running? Is it producing the results that you want? And does it fit in line with what your vision is for First Nation language? And then how long has the program run? And has the program produced any fluent speakers? So I think our goal a lot of times is what is it that we want? What is our goal? Is to produce fluent speakers. And I've been witness, and I've tried to run in the past in schools that I've been in programs such as running them on a school cycle, twice a cycle, as a subject, and bilingual, and they have not produced any language speakers. So when I reflect on that work and the past, you know, those did not fit the language goal that the community wanted, and it did, you know, and it did not fit in the vision for the First Nation language that they had. So we have to we have to think about that. And yes, these questions are also directed for non-First Nations people. If they're taking on the role of being administrators, school administrators, or directors of education within our communities, then they need to find the answers to these questions from the community. To me, that would be part of their responsibility. So many of the answers to these questions do come from community leadership, from school boards, local school boards, if we have them, if those are the governing bodies within the community for education, elders committees, and so forth, parent committees, however they have their processes set up within community. It's the administrator's responsibility to ensure that those are being met. And that, you know, and to be honest, that was tough at times, because you'd have people that are very passionate about language, banging their fist on the table saying, you need to do this. On the other side, you're thinking as an administrator, but we have curriculum we have to follow, you know, and that's hard, that ingrained, I have to follow curriculum, especially when you get into the administrative pieces and budgeting. I have to do curriculum or else we're going to get our funding taken away, or they're going to cut our funding, right? Was always the thought. So it is difficult. So if we go back to the question that Dr. Verna Kirkness proposed in her work there, what do you lose when you lose a language? Her short answer was, you lose your culture. Language is culture, and culture is language. One of the partnerships that we have, I was sitting in a meeting yesterday most of the day, and they had a presentation on, and it's by Manitoba Education, their Indigenous Directorate for our Ministry of Education, and they're working on a partnership with post-secondary institutions on developing Indigenous languages programs for teachers. So in Manitoba, we have our 5 First Nation languages: Anishinaabe, Ninimuin, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene. But we also have Indigenous languages of Inuktitut and Michif. So they're focusing on all 7. And during the whole presentation, you know, and at the end of their presentation, it sounds really good. I'm really looking forward to the developments that are going to happen. But the one thing is, it felt hollow. And it felt hollow because they don't reference culture. And I said, you know, I don't know how you're going to teach strictly language without including culture. And your whole presentation did not mention how the link between language and culture and how they're intertwined. You know, and as Dr. Verna Kirkness said, is language is culture and culture is language. And, you know, if you get a chance, that article that she wrote also talks about how when you lose your language, you lose all the ways that we share, that we talk, that we swear, that we laugh. all those things on how we pray, on how we raise children and so forth. We lose all of that. We lose all of our distinctiveness if we lose our language. And for a long time, as a second language learner, I never understood that. And I guess it wasn't until, a few years ago where when I really started to do more research and look into education and talk with elders and language knowledge keepers, is that change. And I was talking a little bit about that again yesterday about, you can teach language, but then you have to start, it has to transition someplace where you begin to teach in the language. And when you can start teaching somebody in the language, then they'll start thinking in the language. And I completely understood when Mike Mitchell mentioned that this morning in his opening about how he has to think about things in his language first and then say it in English. And that's moving into those mastery levels of language when you start thinking in the language and learning in the language as opposed to just learning language. So the path forward, when we talk about the path forward and how can First Nations education administrators support language preservation and revitalization, I always think about this quote from, at the time, Justice Murray Sinclair, when he said, "Education is what got us here and education will get us out." Now, I know that was in a different context, but I personally feel that we have to use education as a tool to bring language back. And as education administrators, we're steering that ship. We're the ones that oversee the programs of education that deal with staff, with EAs, with parents. And we need to be that facilitator of language. We need to be that support. I've been in many meetings regarding language, and I've heard where people have said, it's not our responsibility as teachers to teach language. That's supposed to be the parents' responsibility. And my counter to that is, well, what happens if the parents don't speak the language? Then what? What do we do? Do we say, oh, well, I guess we can't do anything? I said, no, absolutely not. We have to do something. What that looks like and what we're capable of that's what we have to plan for. But we need to use education as a tool now to revitalize language and culture. I think we're beyond, and I've said this for the past year. I've really noticed that there's been a transition in First Nations education, especially in our region, where things are looking different, are feeling different, especially in regards to language and culture, in regards to how curriculum is being considered and so forth. So, I think we're at a pivotal point in First Nations education where we're actually now able to do some of the things that we wanted to for years. And starting to change programming and so forth. So I've been doing a little bit of research and I found this on the web, on the Government of Canada website. And this is a timeline of reports and recommendations on First Nation education since Indian control of Indian education and all the way up until 2015. These are all documents where we've been poked and prodded about First Nations education. So every time our leadership had said, you guys need to do more, provide more funding, they said, oh, let's do a study. Let's do a nationwide study. So these are all the ones. I know it may be hard to read on your end, but these are all the reports. So we have Indian control of Indian education, the report on the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, UNDRIP. We have status report on the auditor, from the Auditor General of Canada to the House of Commons, We have the Standing Senate Committee on Aboriginal Peoples, Reforming First Nations Education. We have the report of the National Panel on First Nations Elementary and Secondary Education. So these were all these were, like I said, where we've been poked and prodded as stall tactics for why we need additional funding to do the things that we wanted to. And the big one was language and culture. And I know for many of you that have been in education a long time, you know that we've never been funded for language and culture. It was only in the last 3 years now that First Nations have started receiving funding that has actually been designated for language and culture. It's the first time ever. And I know that even organizations like the one that I work with now, FNEAA, many of the proposals that went in included language and culture, and government sat there and said, no, you can't do that. No, no, no. And they would take all the references out of the proposal regarding language and culture up until recently when the funding mechanisms changed. So, but the reason why I bring these documents up is, and I know you may not be able to read it from where you are, but all of these are quotes or excerpts from these documents that all indicate the importance of language and culture. So in every one of these, except I think it was the Auditor General's report, all of them make reference to the importance of teaching language and culture. It's a priority in all of these documents. So that's why I bring this forward, is trying to change that thinking that this has always been a priority. Language and culture has always been a priority that has been brought from these studies where we've been poked and prodded about education, First Nations education. But why has it been so tough to get traction? And again, part of it has been funding, but now that that's changed. So, you know, a lot of these still hold true because they haven't been met. These recommendations and calls to action and so forth have not been met. So how can First Nations education administrators support language preservation and revitalization? The first part of it is referring to some of the documents. I chose these ones because these ones are in Manitoba, are the most prevalent that are brought up when we start talking about language and culture with our leadership, with our education directors. We always refer back to Wabung. So Wabung was written in 1971, and Dr. Verna Kirkness at that time was the principal writer for the educational portion of that document that outlined what exactly our elders, leaders, and senior educators at that time in 1971, what they wanted for education, what they wanted for their children and grandchildren, which is us. And it's still a foundation. We consider this a foundational document in education because many of the things that they outlined in there still have not been met, and we're 50 years later. So this document is now 51. I'm going to be 51 years old, and we haven't met those. We used the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a mechanism to show the importance of language. We, you know, it's unfortunate that Canada wasn't signatory to it immediately, but that they did come in after important topics that we need to teach children. Of course, we have our Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action. And there's a number of references regarding language and culture, both in the education part, but also in its own section in there. And then most recently, of course, is the Languages Act that was passed in June of 2019, which many people still do not know about. You know, I know our CEO talked about Commissioner of Languages, and I actually brought that up in the meeting yesterday, And nobody had ever heard that there's even a commissioner of languages or who that person would be. These are some prominent people that are prominent in language work in Manitoba. They're the heads of 3 or 4 of the major language organizations that provide language training, resources, and so forth. And they never heard of the Commissioner of Languages office or of Dr. Ignace. So we're not doing a good job of promoting those processes of the Indigenous Languages Act. That's a side note, sorry, that's me getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but we need to do more. We need to promote. And I bring that up because we need to promote our languages. You know, why are Indigenous languages crucial for us? Why? You know, do we have the answers? Do you as administrators, as First Nations have the answers? If somebody was to ask you that, would you be able to spit out the answer right now? You know, if you have parents who are coming into the school and say, well, why should we learn Ojibwe? Do you have the answer? You know, and I know I'm getting close on time, so I'm not going to read everything. But here is another piece that I took from the Global Action Plan of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. Another topic that most people don't know about. Most First Nations don't know that we're in the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. What's that, they say? When is that? I said, well, we're almost finished year 1 of the Indigenous Decade of Indigenous Languages, and people don't know about it. People are not planning for it. You know, and again, this is a piece that I took from there that stresses the importance of language, and that's an international one. So I don't know how many of you in the room today knew or know about the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, that it's happening right now, that there's a global action plan, that Canada has a very minimal plan for that. But I guarantee if French and English were Indigenous languages, they'd have a big comprehensive plan, and we would have had some kind of big celebration already this first year, but it's pretty quiet. So, you know, I think it falls upon each and every one of us that we got to start doing more to plan to celebrate our languages across Canada. So we need to promote the positives of knowing, speaking, and understanding our languages. What are the positives? You know, what makes us who we are? We need to share the significance of languages, the necessity for languages, the values that are shared in the languages. And I've talked with many elders, and I don't mean no disrespect, but the 7 teachings, we don't only have 7 teachings. Somebody marketed that and did well. You know, when I talk to Cree elders in our traditional elders, you know, some of the lodges that they do, they have 27 values that they teach just as part of one lodge. You know, the base lodges have, you know, 14 and so forth, right? So 7 is you know, good for beginning, but there's a lot more. The knowledge that's passed in the language, you know, is so critical, especially land language. And I talk about land language specifically because there's words and terms that you only use when you're out on the land. When you're gutting deer, when you're preparing meat, even when you're hunting. Many people don't know those words anymore because they don't participate in those activities. So that type of knowledge, plants, the animals, the fish, you know, those are all important. And again, the land-based references, knowing knowing how to live and guide yourself out on the land. I always tease my boys, you got to learn. What's going to happen? Are you just going to curl up into a ball and give up? Or are you going to take what you're being told and taught and use that, right? When the lights go out, my youngest son is the one you want to follow because he'll survive. I know he will. He's got so much survival training. I wouldn't follow anybody from the city because they would try and hide in the basement, and you know what would happen there. So, you know, the land-based work is very important to our languages as well. And we need to make language learning a priority. You know, I argue that it has to be just as important or more important than literacy, numeracy, and so forth. So some considerations. How am I doing for time, Claire?
We're just about out of time.
Okay, so we need to look at what is important for the education of First Nations. So what is it that the students need to be healthy? We need to really think about that. I think we really, and I know in talking with directors and administrators in Manitoba, the pandemic sure taught us a lot about what our children need from education and what is not so much a priority. And we see that with a lot of the mental health issues now that have arisen because of the pandemic. They were there before, but I think the pandemic amplified those. And it wasn't numeracy or literacy that they needed to be healthy. There was other things. They needed language, they needed culture, they needed healing. They needed to support and nurturing of their whole person, not just their mental and their physical, right? So we learned a lot from that. And then we have to look at what has our current education system achieved. What is it, you know, the way we've been running school, education, what has it achieved? Has it achieved 80, 90, 100% success that we would want? And if it hasn't, why hasn't it? What has been missing? We need to consider what is the goal of First Nation language for the community. Again, I talked about that. All administrators, you need the guidance of community, you need the support of community leadership, parents, grandparents, elders, and what do they want? You know, it's your job to get that information and put it into an education plan. Filter that through into education. We need to change the negative connotations that surround language. Things like the notion that First Nation languages have no purpose, that First Nation languages impede student success, that First Nation languages cannot survive. So we have those negative naysayers out there that say that. The one that really, you know, I guess is so misunderstood is that it impedes student success or academic achievement. You know, we've seen, you know, in research where the Hawaiians, the Maori, the Mohawk, where they've done studies that show students that are in the immersion programs score academically higher than their English counterparts. And we actually have one community now in Manitoba that has been running an immersion program for 5 years. And they're going to be releasing their information on that study of students that were in the Cree stream and the English stream of education, and how the Cree students, ones in Cree immersion, scored significantly higher academically than their English counterparts in the same school. But beyond that, the students in the immersion program show that they want to be in school more, that they like being in school more. So it goes beyond just academics. It's the whole attitude towards school and learning. So we need to believe. We need to believe as administrators that we can and will revitalize First Nation language. We need to believe that. You need to believe that as an administrator, as the guide, as the main facilitator, leader of the school. If you don't believe it, your staff and students won't. If you don't make it a priority, it will not be a priority for them. And as being the principal teacher of the school, that responsibility falls on you. So as an administrator, you need to provide more opportunities for staff to learn their First Nation language, learn to teach the language, and time to develop resources. We're hard on our language teachers. We want them to teach language all day, and any resources you need, well, you can do it after on the weekend, and we don't compensate them for that. We also need to teach our language speakers how to teach the language. I know some communities that have 90% of their staff speak the language, but none of them speak the language in school or teach language. So what is the block there? What is the transmission block there? Looking at that. I talked about this. We need to give teaching, the teaching of language and culture equal or more emphasis than literacy, numeracy, and other subject areas. We need to create language plans that target specific desired outcomes for teaching language, for learning language. What is the end result? What do we want? We want them to know how to count numbers and shapes and colors, or do we want them to be able to speak to us when we ask them something? And that looks different. We need to implement teaching on the land and land-based education. A lot of our education, when I talked about language, land language, you will not be able to teach that in the classroom. Some things you have to be able to, you have to show them. We need to promote the teaching of local history, of who they are, where their people come from, and what affected, what changed them. You know, if we were a certain way pre-European contact, how did the European contact change us? What was the impact on our gifts and so forth? We need to teach that. We need to teach why we are the way we are today and how do we get back. And we need to give hope. We need to give everybody, we need to give our children hope that languages will survive, that we can, you know, get our languages to survive. And we need to do that early. We need to get to our young parents, our children, our young teachers, our aspiring teachers, our aspiring administrators. We need to get them to them early on in their career where they will have that passion for revitalizing language. You know, and for me, that wasn't the case. I never had anybody when I was a teacher, beginning teacher or an emerging administrator, instill in me that passion. It didn't come right away. And I think we're not doing a good job of that yet. And we really need to improve is how do we get our young teachers and administrators to realize the importance of language and culture, the importance of implementing those types of programs in our schools, and moving forward in a good way. You know, I said we need education. Education got us here, and education will get us out, as Justice Mary Sinclair said. But we don't do education the way education was done to us and our grandparents. We do it differently. We don't beat it into the kids. We don't threaten them. We do it in good ways. So, and again, that hope. We gotta have hope. You know, if we don't have that hope, it makes it tough for people to believe in us. Oh, sorry. So just to close things off, you know, we need to have that clear purpose, planning, and production are key. We need to produce speakers. We need to produce language speakers at all ages. If you're a community that has very few speakers, you need to create speakers. You need to create adult speakers who can teach children and so forth. We need to know and understand what our students need to be healthy and whole. So it's not, we got to address all of them, the whole person and their needs. And we need to give that hope that we can meet the language goals of the First Nations. So if leadership, school boards, elders give us language goals, we need to meet those goals. And we need to work toward instilling the importance of language. So I just have a short video that I'd like to share. It's a little bit of a promo for our work. It's short, it's only about a minute, and then I'll be finished. So Simon, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear it. And that's my piece, my 2 cents. Or I should say my 5 cents, because we don't have pennies anymore. So
Chibigwich, David. I'm sure I speak for everybody for giving you thanks for that informative, challenging, and inspiring presentation. You speak with passion about the work that you do. Chibigwich, thank you very much.
right.
So next, I think Davin knew that we were missing a speaker in the next group, so he took that speaker's little bit of time there. So we have another of our board, Bill Shade, who's a recent board member. Bill is from he's the superintendent, Stoney Education Authority in Alberta, and he will be presenting the panel. Edwin Taylor, who's going to speak about revitalization of languages through song. We think that their internet's down. We couldn't phone him, we couldn't email him, and he's from Wapple Island, and sometimes their internet service is a bit sketchy. But okay, so I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Bill, who will introduce the speakers for this panel. Bill?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Shade. My first language name is Makoyapi, which translates to Wolf Old Man. That was the name given to me by my grandmother. It was actually her father's name, Makoyapi, Willie Scraping White. I'd like to thank Elder Mike Mitchell for the prayer this morning. And I've been involved in, education for a number of years. I was an auto mechanic, teacher, principal, now superintendent. And I've known also Davin for quite a number of years. We've worked together on a few projects. The thing that he mentions is the land-based learning is something that's really caught our eye over here in Stoney Nakoda territory, and we're really trying to push that for our students, because they do need to know who they are and where they come from and why it's so crucial to learn about that. So thank you for that message, Davin. At this time, I'd like to introduce Cherith Mark. I do work closely with Cherith. Cherith is from Stoney Nakoda here, and she'll speak on multi-level language revitalization curriculum. She does reside here in Minithni, which is Morley, Alberta, in the Treaty 7 territory in southern Alberta. She's a language champion for our community, and she's often called upon for assistance in coordinating with elders for translation with language projects. In addition to these, she also advocates for language in our schools through her hard work with Stoney Education Authority. serving as the lead coordinator for SCA and the Stoney Language Resource Development Project, which she'll address, which includes the Ethka language books, word collection activities, and also assisting in curriculum implementation. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Cherith Mark.
Yes, Bill. Ambawastits. Good day, everybody. My name is Cherith Mark. I come from the Stoney Nakoda Nation in Morley, Alberta, which is Minisni, 30 kilometers west of Calgary, Alberta. I am actually the language and culture coordinator for the Stoney Education Authority. And what I will be talking to you today about is our multi-level language resources and basically our process. So there will be some very interesting tools and possibly tips for all of you as I share our journey for language revitalization and how we've started and how we've actually are continuing the process here. Okay, so let me just share my screen here with you. Go. Okay, I'm not too sure if you can see that. Can everybody see that? Can someone give me a thumbs up?
It looks good.
Okay, awesome, great. All right, so the Stoney Education Authority, Stoney Language Resource Development Project. Now, I'm just going to give you a bit of background of who we are. Stoney Nakoda Nation. So our flag basically represents the people, as you can see on your top right-hand side. We are 3 bands composed of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Good Stoney. We also have 3 communities within the Stoney Nakoda Nation, which are Eden Valley, Morley, and Bighorn. We are part of the Treaty 7 nation territory in Alberta. So that's basically southern Alberta, all the way down to the border, the US border. So our language family is the Siouan Assiniboine. Sometimes we get mistaken for being part of the Lakota Nakota Nation language family, but we are actually closely related. And some people will probably have different information on this. Our language use population, 30 years and older, speak and understand the Stoney Nakoda language. By that, we have speakers over the ages of 30 that understand and are fluent. Unfortunately, some refuse to use the language on a daily basis. And we even have parents who are in their 30s that will not use the language in their homes to teach the children, mainly because they feel that if they introduce the language, they will have issues learning in school. So English is the preferred language. Unfortunately, we have children that come to our schools who are very proficient in language. However, they're not very literate in the English language. They have issues, and that's a cause for concern. But our schools are doing all they can to help the children be proficient. As well, our written languages, we use the Latin script due to the nasal and glottal sounds in our language. We have a lot of nasal, as an ambawastit, and glottal, which is the RH. So most of our language has that, the undertones of the words. So this is the script that we use. So for Stoney Education Authority, our goal is to develop a strong foundation of materials to support our language speakers in our school communities. Unfortunately, it feels that a community and parents especially have given upon themselves, they want the teachers to teach their children the language. And that's fine. However, students are only in language class for 40 minutes twice a week. And that's not enough for language retention. And so it goes back to language learning at home. And this is where we're really pushing for parents to teach the language to their children at home. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in barriers because we have maybe one parent that speaks Stoney and maybe another parent that speaks Cree or Blackfoot, or probably doesn't know their language. And so in order for the child to communicate with both parents, English is actually used more at home. And so we find ourselves in this position, and I'm sure you find yourselves in the position you are at in your communities, that this is the reality that we find ourselves in. And so how we started our language resource development project is that we partnered with the Language Conservancy, who are a non-for-profit organization that work with Indigenous communities all over North America. They basically help to revitalize the language. And so they've actually worked with quite a few Indigenous languages, and their partners are the Crow, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, Mountain Ute, and Tahltan, just to name a few. They've worked with numerous other Indigenous language communities, but these are the ones that they've really championed. I believe Lakota and Crow are in the forefront with developing resources with them. They use a template to create these languages, to basically write their languages. And so how did we create a level 1 textbook? Well, the language documentation process was very interesting. This is something that we've never actually been a part of. And so what they use is called a rapid word collection, which is developing a database to begin the dictionary process. So by creating this database, we were able to compile words which that the human brain organizes already with the relationship that it has with one another, that categorizes these relationships into groups. By that, it employs the use of semantic domains and subdomains, meaning that the interpretation of words, signs, sentence structure, all of that. And so the RWC requires bringing together fluent speakers as well as elders to work on word associated activities, basically a collection or a basket of words. So for example, a folder can entail things, like what are the things in the language? Another folder can contain kinship words, kinship terms. Another folder can be the even new words, like words for computer, words for cell phone, new words that haven't been developed yet. So these were all categorized in these domains. And so the rapid word collection basically is a gathering of people. And so our collection started in September of 2019, and we gathered at the Stoney Nakoda Resort and Casino. So we had a 2-week event, which we gathered about 14,000 words and over 11 hours of storytelling. Now, how that happened was that 46 to 50 participants participated daily. We had a huge turnout for this event, which was amazing. And so we grouped 7 to 8 people per group, and we paired them with a scribe. Scribe is a linguist who's knowledgeable in orthography. But the key to that was that they worked with our elders and our speakers who were actually knowledgeable in our orthography, the Stoney language orthography. And they worked on the sentence and words and the structure that brought that together. So that was very, very key. And so we have I have some pictures here of our events throughout since 2019. So the Rapid Word Collection 2019. So that's that's our group. And that's not even everybody. That's maybe a quarter of them. A lot of speakers came out and supported this event because it was needed. I think our community needed a gathering like this to promote our language. And throughout the years, we've gathered in smaller groups, mainly due to COVID. You know, I believe 2020 was when COVID began. And so we had to be very careful in moving forward because we're working with elders, and the health of our elders was in the forefront. Our review process is still ongoing and it's still steady. We're still continuing to come together and review. What helped with our review process was that the three bands, Chiniki, Bear Spa, and Good Stony, we had to have equal representation in our events, because we, like the previous presenter mentioned, we did encounter barriers about family clans, the dialects of families, and which words to use, which words that to leave out. We actually didn't leave anything out. We incorporated all family dialects into our resources. That way, every dialect was represented. And so that was very, very crucial for us in this process. And during COVID, again, we met in small groups. Below is a picture of a time when we had to meet. We had limited people, but we did invite proficient speakers who were very knowledgeable in sentence structure and the written form. And so we worked with them closely and intimately, just because we had to continue this work. We had to get it going. And so we had that, we brought that in. So this is our level 1 textbook. It actually works well with a Stony media player, which I have a video of in my next slide. And so what the Stony level 1 textbook, it's geared towards elementary students who are starting to, they hear the language, but they're not proficient yet. They can possibly respond to you in English if you do speak to them in Stony, but they're not there yet. So the level 1 focuses more on greetings and basic words and with animals and colors and terms and kinship terms. And so with that, we create lesson plans from each unit. And so we're working on the, I don't have a, I don't know if you can see this, but we are working on the level 2 textbook right now, but it's just a draft. We're working on the draft version right now, and I can't really share that quite yet. But in my next slide, I will play a video of how the level 1 textbook and the Stony media player work hand in hand. So I will play this for you. Hopefully you can hear it. Today, I'm going to show you how to use the Stony media player. First, you will need an iPad with the Stony media player icon. And you will need a Speak Stony level 1 textbook. Let's here we go. Get started. So press on the app, and this will pop up. Stony media player. Books. Under books, you will see the level 1 icon. Enter camera. Warning. Please remain aware of your surroundings while using augmented reality. It is best used while seated with your language learning book set in your lap or on your desk. Adult supervision is advised for young children. Okay. We return to Unit 2. Unit on sound. What is this? As you will see, your iPad has to be a specific trajectory for the icons to pop up. As you can see, this will take a while. So once you see the voice icons pop up, press on the icon.
Bonjour, Cherith.
As you will see, sometimes these voice icons will not pop up because your camera is not situated where it's supposed to be. But this is Unit 2. What is this? If we go to the audio guide, you will see all the different words in this unit. Press on the words. As you will see, yeah, all these words are in Unit 2. They're written in Stony, and they're also written in English. You just press on the words so that it can show you what they mean. And so with the media player, the great thing about it is that students can actually use this tool along with the level 1 textbook at home. They can just download it on their app, and then they can just go along with it throughout the book as each unit describes specific items and themes. Unfortunately, sometimes technology doesn't always work like we want it to. And so, you know, techno stress happens. And so we have to be able to learn how to use this multimodal tool, which is really great for our students, because not only do they get to see how you're able to use the tool, but you can also hear the elders and the fluent speakers that have been recorded that was done during the rapid word collection. So during that event, a lot of recordings took place of elders and of speakers. And so out of that created our Stony language picture books, which we translated into Stony. And so a lot of it had to do with our elders reviewing. So the review process was ongoing. So we had to make sure that each page was translated correctly, and that we actually didn't publish these books until we got final say from elders. So we took our notes from elders so that we made sure that everything was okay and printed. And so with why we took this approach, why we went through that direction of partnering with TLC, and why we're trying to revitalize or even reclaim the language, is because throughout that process, we actually lost 3 of our elders that took part in our rapid word collection. You know, they had a lot of knowledge, and so we recorded their knowledge so that their legacy continues. And it's very interesting because we've had a lot of criticisms and barriers throughout this process. But a quote I'm going to share with you by Alex Fire Thunder, who's a Lakota speaker, who's actually part of the Lakota, the language he's doing with his community in Pine Ridge. is that he said that if a language doesn't adapt, it will be an extinct language. And by that, I think he means that if we don't adapt our language to today's technology, because the 21st century the technology belongs to 21st century. So we have to catch up to it. And if we don't document our language, again, we're going to lose elders. We're continuing to lose elders. And I think the emphasis is really crucial because we're going against time, where we don't have a lot of time because our elders are passing away. Knowledge keepers are passing away. So we have very limited space to really work and document the language. And so for us, it's been very crucial to get everything documented. That way we're able to create and to have that information so that it is documented and it's ours, and that we're able to we're able to collect as much as we can. And so so that's just a brief presentation of one of our level 1 textbook. Our level 2 textbook is for elementary students, grade 2 to grade 6. So our level 1 textbooks is geared towards elementary. However, it is also, it can be used for the beginner learner, even if you're an adult, which is fine. Like the teacher can adapt, the language teacher can adapt the lessons for the learner. As long as we have something on print, it's very important and crucial for us because we don't have anything. We don't have anything documented that we know of. So this is something that it's been a big endeavor that we had to get this done. And yes, thank you. So I'm not sure if we're able to take any questions, but I see a hand up.
Yeah.
Sessions.
So what was the name of that app book, the learning book thing to teach the Stony language?
Yeah, it's the, let's see, let's go back here. It is the level Speak Stony level 1 textbook.
Right. That was really cool.
Oh, yes.
I really like that, actually.
Oh my gosh, yes.
The app is a bit janky, perhaps, with the whole focusing the camera, but other than that, which is to be expected generally with these new technology things, it's really good. I think this is a great idea.
Yes, no, definitely. Like it actually meets the necessary needs at home for children. They can actually take this home. And I know that some of our children have already have iPads, and so you can download it, or you can download it on a phone. It's just sometimes it doesn't catch it as good as we want it to, but with time, hopefully we're able to work out the kinks and the bug go with that. But it's really, really neat tool. Thank you, Claire.
I don't know if there's any other questions. If there is any questions like later on today, I believe you can use the chat, and then I guess we'll work with FNEAA and try to get some of those answered. Just to kind of elaborate on a couple of points that Cherith did make. We did face, like she did mention, we did face barriers and challenges. But one of the quotes that really stood out at the beginning was, I remember one of the elders stood up and said, we're going to face many, and it was actually one of the elders that we lost during this project. But he stood up and he said, we've already tried this before, and we've faced many barriers. And what he said was, let's just get this done, and we'll worry about the other stuff later. And what he meant about other stuff was the challenges of, like someone coming up and saying, no, that's not how we say that word. This is how we say it. And, and Cherith mentioned that. And one of the ways we how we dealt with that was we took all forms of pronunciations and we utilized all of them. So we didn't tell anybody, no, we're going to use it this way. We just took everything and we put it in there so that we have as much information as possible. Well, that's kind of one of the things that we faced. And the other thing is with one of the reasons we call it level 1, and Cherith did mention that, is we didn't want to call it grade 1 because, you know, if you have a student that's just going to start out with it in, let's say, grade 10 or grade 11 that doesn't speak, level 1 sounds better to that student. So that's kind of some of the little things that we learned. And like Cherith said, this is a living document, and you know, we're going to keep developing it as we move along. Thank you. All right, so thank you, Cherith. I don't know if you have any other closing comments or before we move on to our next speaker.
Bill, there's a question by Marie.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Hi, I just had a question on for the rapid word collection project that you guys did. Do you guys have it documented somewhere, like in a paper or book or report somewhere?
Yes, actually, we had quite a number of our urban or our rural center newspapers that came out and kind of visited us during this time. I believe we have, I think it's in CTV News, Calgary, that did a write-up or story on us, as well as a Rocky Mountain Outlook, which is the Canmore local newspaper, as well as the Cochrane Eagle newspaper. So once I will look at, I will check out those if you wanted to see how the process began. So those are just some of the few newspapers that came out and did a story on us while we were having this event. So I believe it's you're able to find them on Google. Yes.
Thank you so much.
There we go. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Marie.
All right. Yep, thank you. So with that, thank you, Cherith. I know it's exciting work. The kids were definitely thrilled using the iPads, and just kind of adds another element of interest level for the students. With that, I guess we'll move on to the next speaker, Simon. We'll just move on to the next one. And that is going to be Brandon Mitchell. And Brandon, excuse me if I don't pronounce some of the words right, but I'll do my best. I'll have to brush up on my Mi'kmaq. Brandon will speak about his graphic novel that helps preserve Indigenous oral history. Brandon Mitchell is Mi'kmaq from the Lestugu First Nations in Quebec and currently resides in unceded Wolastoqiyik territory in Fredericton, New Brunswick. He is husband to Natasha Martin, father to Braden and Bryce Mitchell, and he carries a diploma in animation and design from the New Brunswick Community College in Miramichi, and also holds a master's degree from the University of New Brunswick. He is co-founder of Birch Bark Comics, creator of Sacred Circle comic circles, which explored the Mi'kmaq heritage through a contemporary lens. So this time I'd like to turn it over to Brandon Mitchell. Welcome.
Hi everybody. Thanks for that wonderful intro. That just reminds me that I need to work on my intro and maybe condense it a little bit more. And I'll do my best the next time I'm asked to do something. And maybe provide some phonetics. That's what I need to do next. Hi. So yeah, I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. And if not, it's going to be me. Oh, look at that. Share. And I probably should have, look at that. There we go. So yes, thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here. It was a really great keynote, and I really liked your last presentation. I'll be talking about preserving Indigenous oral history through graphic novels. So I'm going to try and condense I don't even think I need to go through my intro because it was already well said by Bill. So I'm going to just jump right into it. Part one of what I want to talk about is a little bit more about my background. So my background, yes, is in animation. I graduated with an animation diploma back in 20 years ago. And what was great about that opportunity or that experience was just days before graduation, I was offered a position to teach back home in Listuguj. So I was offered a teaching position, and I was terrified because I had an animation diploma, not a teaching diploma. But I did what I could, and I already had a reputation of being a really, I'm going to try and I'm super modest here, but they were just like, oh my God, Brandon knows how to draw. And I'm just like, yeah, but I'm not that great. And I also knew how to turn a computer on. So I was hired on as an art instructor and computer instructor. So it was a really great opportunity to do that. One of the things that I noticed though, when I was teaching there was, and this was 22 years ago. Geez. So yeah, this was a long time ago. There wasn't any content. Like we didn't have any content. There was nothing fun for the kids to read. There was, and our stories weren't being told or they weren't being shared. It was all just it was just popular culture content. And I tried to do something different with that. And that's where the idea for Sacred Circles came along. And I started my own business, tried to get that off the ground. With that, I took a chance on myself with the content I was trying to do. There wasn't a lot of Indigenous comic books 20 years ago. There wasn't a lot of Indigenous creators 20 years ago. And I learned one of the things about there was maybe 3 of us, and we were all we were really trailblazers in this area. The one thing about being a trailblazer is you get to make a lot of mistakes, or you get to do a lot of, no, it's not mistakes. You do a lot of learning, and I learned a lot. But the great thing about it was taking a chance on myself. I got other opportunities. People caught wind of what I was doing, and I was hired by Healthy Aboriginal Network, now Indigenous Story Studios out in BC. We did I did 7 stories for them on Indigenous health issues, and he kind of kept that spark alive for me. And eventually I got asked to participate in this place. So some of you shouldn't be, but if you're not aware, but this place is done by Highwater Press, and it's telling its revisionist history through an Indigenous lens. So 10 Indigenous authors from across Canada were brought aboard to write about a particular moment in Canadian history. And this was kind of like going back to a lot of the things that I held dear to my heart, because when I was asked to be part of this project, I was really shocked and humbled and grateful for this opportunity. One of the things that they asked me was if you could write, like when one of the things they asked right away, like, what would you want to write about? And I was like, I want to write about the incident in Listuguj back in '81. And they didn't know about it. And I was like, really? And I told them a little bit about it, and they're like, oh my God, this will be a great addition to the book. So that was a really great opportunity to be part of this really great graphic novel that just kind of like took on a life of its own. One of the things that I wanted to do with this graphic novel was, and a lot of things with a lot of the storytelling that I do, it's about sharing our stories, and it's about placing value on our stories. It's not just about, there's a lot of value just in like going out fishing like, you know, like what are those little moments, right? Like, I always find it funny, like, you know, like we have to tell like these big grandiose stories, and I always try to bring it down to like a more grounded level, and trying to tell like a more grounded story, and that's where my love for storytelling and my love for sharing other people's stories kind of came into play. One of the things about the incident in Restigouche was I wasn't born. I was only 1 year old when it happened. So my parents had the foresight to leave when this happened. But I remember growing up when we came back, and I was like 5 or 6, and I remember going to my grandmother and my uncles. They would talk, it was fresh in their minds. They're talking about the raids, and, you know, and those were like the memories that I remember of it, like their stories of what happened. It wasn't vivid details, or no, there was vivid details that they told me, and I would picture them in my mind. And as I grew older, these stories were being told, like they weren't being told as much. You know, they were kind of fading into the collective ether. And I fell victim to it just being part of the past. And it was only until when I moved to Ottawa back in 2004. Well, my wife and I we moved to Ottawa, and one of the coolest things that happened was, you know how you go to you go to a new place and you see other Indigenous people, Native people, and you know the first thing they do, like, where are you from? And they're usually mean about it, right? Sizing you up. And I was like, but I'm a gentle soul. Why are you guys being so mean? But it was so funny because I was just like, you know, trying to be all manly. I was like, I'm from Restigouche. And they're like, oh, Restigouche, eh? Oh, raids back in '81. So there was a lot of people that were like back then that were in their late 40s, early 50s that had that I didn't know that were actually part of the bigger like helping Restigouche when the raids happened. So that was really one of those cool things where I was just like, holy geez, like this was a really big thing that happened. And I always remembered these stories, like, you know, and that's when I'll be just like, that was as opposed to not being, I was never ashamed to say I'm from Restigouche, but I'll be just like, yeah, I'm from Restigouche. Afterwards, right, the tone kind of changed a little bit because I wanted to see, that was kind of like a little calling card of like, you know, well, who were the people that were like, what do people remember about '81? So that was really cool, and it's always kind of stuck with me. So these are little I'm hopefully I'm getting to a bigger point here, but these were like just little things that kind of always stuck with me and how I want to tell and how I tell stories, finding those little connections, finding those little baselines, right? So I always had, so it was in the mid 2000s that, you know what, I was doing a little more research and I wanted to remember more, and I kept on talking more about like always in the back of my mind, I was always trying to learn more about the raids. And if you see over here in this slide, that's Elder Joe LeBeau. He's, if you know about the raids, you know, he was the one that drew a line with his axe. So that was another like key moment or key figures in this very historical event. I don't have, okay, wait a second here. There we go. Next slide. So yeah, I kind of already said that. When I was, like I said, so when I kind of knew what people knew on the ground, like people that were there, I knew what they knew. But I didn't know what other people knew. And I also didn't want to duplicate the incident in Restigouche, which was, there's no way I could ever duplicate or even like be in the same category as Alaneza Bumsaway. So that's where I was like, okay, I've got these kind of strict parameters that I want to do. You know, how do I go about doing it? And like I said, going back, I want to try and find that baseline of understanding. One of the things that I find gets lost in just regular conversation is, you know, that like catch-all terms, or, you know, like we are all treaty people, like, you know, like we need to learn more about the treaties. And that's good. It's good to say those things, but what does it mean on a regional level? Like, I'm from Peace and Friendship Treaty territory in the East Coast. our treaties are very different than the number treaties, you know, and those number treaties are very different. Like there's no, like they're complex, it's diverse. And the danger of just saying like, you know, like, oh, we're all treaty people, or, you know, like, you know, follow our treaties, or, you know, you're like, which ones are you talking about? And what, it's basically which ones are you talking about, and what do you know about them also too, right? And especially for non-Indigenous people, you say that and they're like, oh yeah, well, I know about the treaties, and then you got to go back, well, which ones then? So when I think the responsibility is not on, I don't want to say it's spoon feeding, but I think we're still in this realm of hand holding. And I got really, really defensive about it like maybe 10 years ago. I was really angry about hand holding. And I think I've only stopped being angry about hand holding like maybe 4 hours ago. No, just kidding. Like I would say like maybe 5 years ago, because I went back, I'm going to be jumping around a little bit too here. So I went back to teach at a middle school, and they hired me on as a treaty educator. And it was funny to hear, just like they didn't know, right? So just trying to find out what these baselines were. So, you know, I created a whole thing on treaty, like just like treaties 101, but in the Maritimes. And I had that tool in the back of my hands when I went to write this graphic novel. So that's a lot of that's a heavy topic to unfold, and I don't know how much time I've got, but we'll go to the next slide. The other thing about so with this place is, or with my story, Miigwech Datum, is about our shared history. So one of the shared histories is treaties. The other shared history that we all have as people on this land is a history of oppression. You know, and not a lot of like non-Indigenous people still don't know about the Indian Act. You know, we have these great events like Orange Shirt Day. We have, you know, like these commemorative events, but it's really funny. Like, you know, they're like, they think of these things as still had happened in the past. And when we still need to educate people on like the Indian Act is still real. It still impacts us today. And when I do an explanation of this stuff, I still get this like, I didn't know. And I was like, for real? Okay. So that's where, you know, like, so there's still a lot of hand holding when it comes to this. And then the Indian Act is one of those things where it's like, because, you know, people talk about residential schools, and the day schools are only becoming more part of the conversation now. And, you know, we have the 60 scoop. It's all connected. All these things are connected. So I had this really big task of trying to like make all these connections in a 24-page story in a graphic novel. I hope I did it, but it was a lot of ground to cover in in 24 pages. But what I liked about this of the graphic novel format, it gives us an opportunity to visually share what other people's stories. When I did this also, I went and I talked to people that were like, you know, reflecting back to what I remember hearing, but I went back to the community and I was like, you know, what do you guys remember about the raids? And even when I went to my mother-in-law, she worked at the band office during the time. And she really she just unloaded so much information on me. And it was just something that, you know, I tried to, I wouldn't say it was scary. Like, how do I do this in a responsible way? And how do I do this in a way that's respecting our story, like our ways of telling stories? And then adding my background as an animator. I think like people that study animation or study like if you're in that creative realm, graphic novel, like preserving oral history is just like this natural organic step, because the tools that I've learned as an animator blend in so well into visual storytelling. But the other thing too, and so the artwork that you see here, this is not my artwork. This is Tara Audibert artwork. She's Wolastoqiyik from Tobic, and the really cool thing about this collaboration is it was a real story from the Maritimes. Like, I'm Big Ma, she's Wolastoqiyik, and I don't know, just the authenticity of what we were trying to do felt really special and great. let's see. So that's this place. So this place, the story that I wrote was Migu Datum. Pick up multiple copies, you know, why not? I'll provide signed copies. You never know. So part 2 of this conversation that I wanted to jump into. So we have our shared history or shared, and those are stories, oral stories. The other part is, I'm going to try and switch gears and make it just a tad bit more fun, is our legends, our myths and our legends. And the cool thing is that I got an opportunity after this place came out, and this rarely, like, I'm kind of a work for hire type of guy, so I don't really get asked to create for myself. So when this place came out and, you know, the publisher came back to me and they're like, we want to work with you again. And I'm just like, great, cool. What do you guys want? And they're like, what do you got? And I was really stuck because I was just like, no one's ever asked me that before. So it's been over 20 years since I've created anything for myself. And one of the things I did with Sacred Circles was I always, if I had a chance to go back to it, I wanted to add one of the mythical creatures in our culture. And I know that there are, like, little people are in a lot of cultures and a lot of indigenous cultures, right? But I wanted to share the Bugladamooch. I want to put that character in a story. So I had that opportunity, and this is where the Gaju's gift came about. I said, when I was growing up, this is the little girl is my mom, and the older one is my my grandmother, my Gaju. And my mom, or both my parents, always told me stories as a child, but it was really, and my grandmother too, she would tell me stories. But the one thing that I always liked was I got so excited when they were telling stories because it was how they told their stories. Like, I just knew that, like, I was in for a treat, and I tried to capture that in my writing. And so I'm trying to share, like, this, like, Gaju's Gift is probably one of the more intimate things that I've ever written, just because there was a lot of my experiences in this type of storytelling. Like, this was just like I said, when I got asked to create for myself, I just put it all on the table. But I was really fascinated with how my parents told stories and how I was given stories. And the cool thing, like I said, the other inspiration for this story was, and the kids always get a kick out of this when I present, is these stories are meant to be, there's lessons in them, right? And the lesson that I received growing up was the Bugladamooch is a little trickster. He likes to play pranks. And my mom would tell me, as you can tell from my background a while ago, it's controlled chaos. But my room was worse as a 5-year-old, and my mom would tell me, like, take care of your stuff, or the Bugladamooch is going to take it. And what happened was, I was just one day I was trying to, I was like, okay, I'm going to finally clean my room, and I did that. And I had, like, I love Transformers. You can tell I love a whole bunch of stuff. But I remember having this Transformer, and it was so small, so tiny, but I loved it. And I always played with it. My room was such a mess. I put it away somewhere and cleaned up I was trying to find it, cleaned up my room, couldn't find it, and I was like, I was really sad, I was crying, and I was like, Mom, I can't find my Transformer. And she goes, well, look at your room. And I was like, yeah. Did you clean your room? I was like, yeah. And then she goes, well, the Bugladamooch must have took it. And I was like, okay. And I tried to do a better job of taking care of my stuff after that hard lesson. And to this day, I still haven't been able to find Bumblebee. So that one's gone forever. But another thing too that I want to incorporate, so this kind of goes back to, I found this book 20 years ago, going back to, like, trying to cram a lot of things into really small spaces, especially, like, even this presentation. So I found this book on 6 Mi'kmaq stories 20 years ago, and this was kind of like, I stumbled upon a story about the Genu. I never heard about the Genu before, and I didn't know that we had, like, these, like, really cool, like, creatures. So the Genu is a cannibal giant, And I was like, this is so cool. How can I put this into a story? And then when I found out that I couldn't really put, once I found out the age restriction, I said I couldn't put a cannibal giant in a kid's story. So I just toned it down to a giant. But it was still cool to have these being exposed to these characters, and how can I introduce them to a larger audience. So these are my drawings. So these are some of the drawings that I did for Giju's gift. So that's the genuine. I really like doing the pencil work. So that was a rough sketch of my version of the Bugladamooch. And this is the protagonist of the story. And I've tried to do something really fun with her. Like the question that I asked too was like, what would happen if a little girl found a Bugladamooch? What kind of adventure or mischief could they get into, right? So that was really fun to do. For those that did, so once again, trying to cram a lot into the written page or the visual page. I really want to try and share our culture and this story. I want to get rid of pan-Indigenous iconography. As mentioned before, I kind of hinted at like I'm kind of work for hire, but a lot of the things that I've done were I've always done pan-Indigenous work. So you want a logo, draw me a feather. I've done so many logos. If I've drawn another feather, I'm going to lose my mind. I like to explore our cultures and our diverse cultures. Like what makes us unique, not what makes us all the same. So in this book, I had the opportunity to share our clothing. So this is just an example of some of the research that I did for the types of clothing that we wore, and I want to put that into this story. Another cool thing with the book is the importance of visual landmarks. Like it's the kids had a blast. Like when I shared this story, and for anybody that wants to do this too, right? Like this is like, I'm not trying to, hopefully I'm inspiring people that want to write or create stories. It's so important to have visual landmarks because when the kids see something that they recognize, they're going to latch onto the story. They're going to latch onto the message that you're trying to show or tell them. If you're just doing generic, like, like playground, this is a playground, or, they were fishing along, whatever. It's so important to incorporate as much of your surrounding area visually into whatever content you're trying to create. It makes it builds a connection to the reader and to your audience. These are just some photo references. The snowy one is well, they're both from back home. So this is Listuguj. And for those that are from Listuguj on this meeting, it doesn't feel good to see it. But there's important landmarks here, and it's cool to create those visual connections with the reader. So yeah. These are some other references. These are some other references and landmarks from back home that are in the book. And then, like I said, it's cool to have these landmarks and visual references because once again, I don't expect everybody to pick it up and and go to Listuguj, but to know that these places there's a reason why these landmarks are there and that they're real or tangible. Once again, it's about building connections with the reader, making those connections, those visual connections, and placing importance on. I'm not just trying to place importance on Listuguj, but for creators, place importance on the area, the territory that you're in. Like that's the most important thing that you can do for your audience. Look at that, done. Well, Alan, thank you, merci. For those who are interested, also, so here's some contact information. I think it's in the I'm not sure where it's at, but birchbarkcomics.com. That's where you can go see all the works that I've done. Portage Main and Press, that's where you can go and order Giju's gift or this place, or you can go to Chapters. They're both there. My email is bnmitchell@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram @writer_Brandon_Mitchell. And I'm ready to take a nap now.
Thank you, Brandon. Wow. I think some of your presentation will explain why there's certain playoff teams that disappear during the playoffs in NHL. With that, I would like to turn it over to any questions on the chat or Simon. If you see anybody raising their hand, you may have some questions for Brandon.
There was a lot of miigwetches in the chat. Everybody's thanking Cherith and Brandon for their presentations. Thank you, Bill, for being an excellent moderator. I think this was really an exciting
We
panel.
have a hand up. It's Parker.
Oh, Parker.
How do I pronounce the name of that little person?
Oh,
Or even spell it? It's very.
so it's funny if you buy the book. The great thing about the book is that I have it broken down phonetically.
Oh,
so for the low price
very
of
nice.
It's Boogaladamuch.
Boogalagamuch.
Yeah.
Something like that. All right.
Boogalagamuch.
Well,
Boogaladamuch, yeah.
I may be a settler, but I do feel closer to that than British fairies. So there's that.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. That was really wonderful. When we met Brandon last week, I think everybody was wanting to move into his place and play around with these stuff in the background. So I know my grandsons would. So thank you very much. We're going to have Claire just to do a quick how to navigate. I mean, I know Brandon's been talking about navigating literature and storytelling, and how are we going to navigate Zoom events this afternoon when we go from one area to another. Claire.
Hi, everyone. Well, if you made it to this meeting, then you're a step ahead. This is what my Zoom event looks like. If I go to the lobby, we have Inception here because the meeting is being live broadcasted to the lobby as well. We can see which meeting we're currently in, and we can see which ones are starting soon. So you can see that we have two separate sessions starting in 37 minutes. Workshop 1, Language and Cultural Revitalization and Indigenous Language and Quebec Language Law. So to navigate back to those, you'll go back to the Zoom events lobby. That link is probably in your email, or you might still have it on your computer screen. And when those events are live, you'll be able to join it just like you joined this one. And if you're in the Quebec Language Law workshop, but you're also really interested in what's happening in workshop 1, all of these workshops are being recorded and will be uploaded to this lobby as soon as they're processed by Zoom. So even by tonight, this opening session may be available for viewing. And then at the end of the whole event, after the 2 days, you'll receive a link with all of the recordings. So if you've missed one, if you have meetings this afternoon and you need to step away, you'll still be able to see everything that is being presented. So same goes for the rest of the meetings. You'll just go back to your Zoom lobby and join the meetings once they've started. And that goes for every meeting that we have for the next 2 days. And if you have any questions, you're having issues navigating Zoom, I've been responding to questions as they come in. I think my email is somewhere on the Zoom events, but it's I can also drop it in the chat, or you can drop it in the main lobby chat here, and someone will get back to you, and we'll try to iron out all of those technical problems or things that arise. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Claire. So advice for me, if you're like me, should I just keep my Zoom on and not turn it off?
You'll have to exit this Zoom meeting because the workshops take place in other Zoom rooms.
Ah, okay, perfect. Okay, I think
You may have to log back into the Zoom event to get you back to the lobby and then choose the workshop you want to attend.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We'll be back at 1 o'clock. I know I'm going to try to get on at 10 to 1. So when I get confused, I'll have a few minutes to sort out my confusion. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for this morning. Fantastic.
Thank you, Simon. See ya.